Regular listeners to this podcast will recall that towards the end of December of last year, 2023, I did a live episode in conjunction with the Little Museum of Dublin and Dublin Port to celebrate an exhibition called Solidarity, which was all about the history of the Dockers of Dublin Port. Well, I'm delighted to introduce this bonus podcast about the same topic, but with some different guests who are themselves dockers by trade or members of docker families. Before I get into it, I'd better do the trademark introduction. Welcome to Publin, a podcast about the culture, history and heritage of pubs at home and abroad. I had the great privilege of hosting a discussion in Cleary's pub in December to highlight the new exhibition called Solidarity, the Dockers of Dublin Port. Shortly after that discussion in front of an audience, I then had the opportunity to speak more intimately with a few members of the audience who are each a wealth of knowledge on the topic of the docks. Now, I know that this podcast is primarily concerned with pubs, and I have to confess that pubs don't really get much of a look in these chats. However, I know that the audience of this podcast is very keen on social history, and I figured that I'd be forgiven for going slightly off topic for one episode. Before we really launch into it, I'll just let you know that the exhibition, Solidarity, is on in a wonderful building called the Substation, a beautiful new cultural hub, on Alexandra Road at Dublin Port, Thursday to Sunday, 11:30am to 3:30pm, until Sunday 18th of February. Now, if you hear people in the background of the next recorded chats, it's because the audience were enjoying the hospitality of Cleary's pub, and I think it's an appropriate background ambience for the chats we were having. Now, I'm pleased to introduce three wonderfully effusive and decent people whom I had the great pleasure of chatting to: John Miley Walsh, a docker; Margaret Cullen, the daughter of a docker; and Declan Byrne, founder of the Dublin Dockworkers Preservation Society.
I'll be a little less formal than I was down below because we're more secluded now. Could I ask you just both of your names and where you grew up to start? Miley, if you would. I'm giving your name now, but
John Walsh wouldn't be known as John Walsh on the docks, but Miley started off in Sheriff Street, Cabra, and now in Raheny.
Raheny, okay.
At the moment, yeah.
And would you know Margaret for a long while, or how would you know each other?
I wasn't familiar with Margaret until she joined our society, but I would have worked with her father.
Okay. And Margaret, were you one of the founding members of the society, or have you continued on the work, or what's your role?
No, I just joined when it was already founded. Okay. I don't know how I found out about it, I can't remember at the time, but I know I just joined because my dad was a docker.
Okay.
Yeah. My name is Margaret Cullen, nee Byrne, and Dad was called Glimmer Byrne.
Glimmer Byrne. What did the glimmer element relate it to?
No idea. I could never find that out.
A nickname is just a nickname. You don't need to know where it's from, I guess. What was it like growing up in a docker family? I suppose we've heard from people tonight who are historians of dockers and people who are dockers, but somebody who grew up in a docker family, not necessarily working the docks.
Well, we didn't see a lot of Dad, I have to say, really, because most of the time he was out working. But he was a button man.
Was he?
So he was kind of sure of work, mostly. And he drank.
Right, yeah.
As a lot of dockers did. He was very strict with us children. There were 9 of us, 6 girls, 3 boys.
Right. And what was your house like growing up? Or
we had a 2-bedroom house. Mum, Dad, and the youngest child in 1 bedroom, and the rest in a divided bedroom by a curtain.
Oh my God! So
there you go.
What would your mum have done? She was housekeeper, but
Mum was a very quiet lady. She was very, very quiet, but she just kind of got up in the morning and got on with life. Mm-hmm. That's all I remember. She just got on with it.
Would you call it a happy childhood, or
yes,
provided for?
Yeah, I live in Sheriff Street.
You're still there?
And The freedom in Sheriff Street, I mean, nobody realises what freedom is now for children to go out and play on the streets. You know, play on the swings, play in the playground, or whatever. You just went, and the only time you went home was for meals or bedtime.
Yeah.
Or school, of course.
Yeah. And would all of the families around near where you lived, would you have known each other through through the profession and also through where you live?
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of all had the same upbringing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We all went to school together, you know, made our communions, confirmations and so on together. I'm still in touch with some of them.
Right.
One is my son married a girl whose mother I was in school with.
Right.
And I'd been all over and came back, and all of a sudden this.
Yeah. That's gas. And would you have gone up to the docks as a child, like to bring your dad lunch or anything like that? Or was that somebody else's job within the family?
Yeah. If Dad was working late, you know, and he couldn't get home for something to eat, Mum would make tea in a billy can. Yeah,
Yep,
the billy
we
can.
all did it. We all
with a
used it.
loose lid. It was never screwed on lid. It was just a loose lid sat on it.
A cap, yeah.
And sandwiches. And I was handed a bag with the sandwiches and the can in it with the tea. And I'd get up on this buckety old bike and ride down over the cobbles, and by the time I got to my dad, the tea and the sandwiches were all mixed together. If you know what I mean.
Still nice and nutritious. I'm sure he'd eat anything after a day on the docks.
I don't know. I just handed over the bag and that was it. Cycled home.
Miley, could I turn to you? And when did you start working in Dublin Port? And how did you get into it?
I started as a 16-year-old in 1962
Right.
because my father took sick. I'm from basically the same area as herself here now. It was similar for everyone. We all went through the same kind of rigmarole, bringing the billy can down. And what it did inflamed in me, it's like a kid looking at a fire engine. He wants to be a fireman. I wanted to be a docker from a very early age. When my father took sick, I was roughly about 16 years of age. I got my opportunity. Took it with open hands and started. Might seem young to people nowadays, but it wasn't really that young.
That's when
then.
schooling would have finished,
Yes,
I suppose,
of course.
16 if you went through it.
I didn't do secondary school. I only did one day in secondary school. And an incident happened in the school I was in, which meant it was closed for 3 to 4 weeks. And we had, my father said to me on the second day, "You think you're going to stay here? You're not. You're coming down the docks." Just around the time that I was refused a button, or not a button, but a card, and I was just working towards it every chance I got. I took small jobs all over the place, and eventually when he took sick, it was like manna from heaven for me to get his button.
And what was the money like, if you don't mind me asking, if that's not too personal a question, or what kind of lifestyle did it afford you?
The lifestyle, it was tough work, but the lifestyle and the money, my first day, I had the equivalent of almost 3 weeks' pay of a friend of mine who started an apprenticeship in a bar in Cabra.
Right.
In the Oasis bar, and he was a first-year apprentice, but for one day I got 3 weeks of his, equal to 3 weeks of his pay. It was hard. You don't get money like that for nothing.
Yeah.
But I was willing to stay at it, and I stayed at it for 6 months until he got well again, and he took the button back off me.
Oh. Okay.
So
What did you do then in that scenario?
Well, I rebelled and I joined the British Army for 2 years, and I lasted about a year and a quarter in the British Army, and I left it. I went AWOL because I just couldn't stick what they were doing. and I came back because my father had taken sick again.
Okay.
And I went back onto the docks and never left it until I took the lump, retired from it.
Margaret, if I could come back to you again and the Dockers Preservation Society, is it kind of an active thing where people do work, or is it kind of more of a social club where you kind of get together and share memories, or do you work towards a goal, or to help with exhibitions like this? Or?
They were working towards a goal to have their own place to exhibit all of the artifacts and photos and everything. There are thousands of photographs, absolutely thousands, and they deserve it, I think, for the work they've done.
Yeah.
And I'm delighted to see them getting this bit of recognition.
Yeah, how does it feel, I suppose, to be, recognised for the community you grew up in, or the work you did, or your family did, when, I suppose history is usually about kings and queens, and now there's more of a trend to actually recognise the city we live in.
This is absolutely brilliant. I'm delighted for them. I really am now. I couldn't be more delighted. And they well deserve it.
Absolutely.
And more.
If I could ask, we were talking earlier a bit off mic now about the difference between the north-south divide between Dockers and between people in Dublin. Did you feel that, or was that something palpable for you? You were telling me about, stories of intense rivalry between people in Ringsend and Pearse Street, never mind.
Yeah, there was certainly a rivalry. I think in every city, if you have a river running through the middle of it, you'll always have some kind of rivalry. And that's the type of rivalry it was. We overemphasise it sometimes. If a foreman who is from the south side stands up on a raid and he's going to employ 100 men, well, obviously the guys who are from the north side are going to be standing at the back of the raid, not expecting to get a job. Yeah.
I suppose now it's kind of more of a playful thing. It's a bit of crack to say north side, south side, but if your livelihood's dependent on it,
we're friends for life now.
Yeah. We've a new entrant to the chat.
So the rivalry was there, and then I might have mentioned before, there was a saying in the docks across the bridge, and people have got in touch with me to ask me what that meant, because they always assume that was the rivalry between Ringsend and East Wall and North Wall. But across the bridge was the rivalry. If you were a woman from Ringsend, you were to marry a man from Ringsend. Across the bridge referred to Pearse Street. So the rivalry was there. But what was unbelievable was that when a strike happened, people lost their houses over it. People went into terrible poverty over it. And the employer said, if you apply for your own job back, we'll consider giving you back the job. So that was a way of breaking a fantastic strike where there was 100% solidarity. And they put it into the newspapers, apply for a job. Tells the people, nothing to do with the docks applied. And one Docker name came up on it. And there was a union meeting, and the Docker was the first one up to grab the mic to say, I didn't apply, me missus counterfeited me signature. So the solidarity was unbelievable. Once there was a strike, there was also among the Dockers a kind of a social fund. So if any family went into hardship, this money was used to help them. Even to the extent, if some Docker passed away, no money be raised for the funeral.
Right, yeah.
And all the traditions are now gone, more or less. So if a Docker from the north side or the south side passed away. And this happened in English ports, but as far as I know, only in Dublin. The hearse came into the port and the ship stopped work, and the craneman turned the crane over and bowed it down onto the hearse. And the hearse went both north and south of the quays to honour the Docker that passed away. So that kind of community spirit. Now the next day there'll be a big fight.
So I think the exhibition is probably appropriately named Solidarity then, based on that story.
Without a doubt, yeah.
So thank you very much for sharing your stories.
Pleasure.
Absolute pleasure to have you here and to hear your own oral history and your local history.
Thanks to John, Margaret and Declan for their time and sharing with me and yourselves their memories from the docks. Two more gentlemen I had the pleasure of interviewing about their reminiscences were Richard Boxer Elliott and Paddy Nevins, both of whom were Dockers.
Gentlemen, could I ask you to introduce yourselves first of all, and would you tell me as well if you know each other from work or from the Dockers Preservation Society, or how long have you known each other?
How long are you on the docks?
1960.
And I'm there since 1962 to between 1962 and 63. He's 4 or 5 years older than me, you know what I mean? Now, you were talking to a lad there who was working in the port today. The first fella you were talking to. Charlie Moore, yeah. Like him, I grew up on the docks also.
Right.
I came from the north side of the river, right? From Sheriff Street.
Different story to tell.
From Sheriff Street. Yeah. I was born in Monto. You know where Monto is, don't you? I was born in Monto. Lived in a tenement house in Monto. And then we moved when the flats opened in the north wall in Sheriff Street. My mother and father got a house there. I was only 3 or 4 years of age when we were going down on the horse and car with the furniture on the back of it. It's a long, long time ago, you know. It's a long time ago. And then the docks became my playground, right? And that's where we'd hang around, you know. Now, you had to be very wide because certain individuals saw you on the docks. Men that lived in the area or men that walked on the docks would have said, get home or I'll tell your father on you. You know what I mean? So it wasn't a matter of, are you going to walk on the docks for me? It was when are you going to walk on the docks, right? Now, you couldn't go down to the docks without insurance cards. Right? Which is PRSI or whatever it is today. Yeah. You know, I don't know whether it's the same. Is it PRSI today?
Your RSI number.
RSI, yeah. And as so you had to be 16 to get those, right? So when I became 16, I went to the Boys' Labour just beside Liberty Hall to get me cards. And then I was on to the docks then. My first job, I remember my mother wakening me at 7 o'clock in the morning. And me and my dad then went down in the bus to the docks, down to the north wall, right? And I got out there and on the way down in the bus, men that worked with me dad would say, Boxer, it's the umple starting today, like, you know? And that was my dad's nickname, Boxer.
Boxer,
right?
okay.
So, got into the, couldn't wait to get in, to start working, you know what I mean? So, my dad was a buttonman. My uncle was a buttonman. And my grandfather was a buttonman. So, what happened was, my father got employed by one of the companies, right? And then he'd come back and he'd stand behind me. So it was the boss who was picking out different company would see him and know the score. And he'd say, Boxer. And my dad say to me, go ahead. and I'd go out and I'd hand them me cards. And the first job I started on was a Neverard, a ship called a Neverard company ship.
Okay.
And that was my first job. And it was general cargo and a bit of timber. But on the way over to the boat, my father would have said to some of the men that I would have been working with, look after him, you know, it's his first day, you know. And so they took me in hand, you know.
Right.
And that was the start of that.
That was your start.
And the wages then was 32 shillings a day without your tonnage, right? So I think we were 2 or 3 days at the boat, and that was it,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
So I was introduced. I was away now on a hack, you know.
yeah.
I'm a docker now, and I'm at the being applied. But prior to that, when I was 15, my father, the Dockers opened up a boxing club called the Dublin Port, the Port Workers Boxing Club, right? And my father was one of the founder members, and he became secretary of the club. And he'd have to go to the stadium, let's say, maybe every once a month for a meeting with what's happening in the boxing world in Ireland, right? So whatever had to be done in the stadium, and they'd go up to the stadium. All the secretaries out of all the different boxing clubs around Dublin, and it's kind of get filled in on what's happening and what's going to happen and where there's fights, competitions on and all that kind of stuff. So I was about 15 at this time. And rather than just go away from the job that he was working at, you see, you couldn't just... You were very going to get a man at 5 o'clock, you know, to replace you in the job. So what he done was he made a thing with the men that he was working with. He said, I'll send the young fella down. He won't be able to do much, but he'll do something. So I got down and I'd be shoveling. It was a coal boat.
Right, okay.
And there was a lot of coal to be shoveled, a hell of a lot of coal. It was a grabs. It wasn't like the old, like, I think it was in 1961 that the grabs came in. I'm not too sure, but around that time. Was it 1961, Paddy?
Yeah, around 60.
Around 1960, 61, right?
Yeah.
So it was a grab that was taking the bulk of the coal. But in the tween decks of the ship, the grab couldn't get into the tween deck, so you had to shovel it. So there'd be a couple of 100 ton of coal around the tween decks, you know what I mean? So I'm 15 and I'm strong and I'm fit and I'm milling it. And the man that I was working with was called Matty Nail. He also lived in the flats that I came from. And he said, Dick, slow down. Calm down, you'll be okay. You'll be wore out in no time. He said, here's what to do. And he showed me how to shovel it, push in the shovel, pull it back, and just canter into the hatch.
Let the shovel do the
And
work.
let the shovel do the work, yeah.
Right.
I was milling it, you know.
Paddy, would you have had a similar experience coming to the port, or would you have gone a different route, and would you have worked similar ships as well, or similar
I
cargo?
did starting off. Dick was a button man. I wouldn't have been a button man. I would be a non-button man. So I'd have maybe a different experience.
I wasn't a button man in the beginning. I was a non-button man.
Yeah, you weren't a button man at 15, but
No, I wasn't a button man at 16 either. I wasn't a button man till my dad died.
yeah.
And that was, I was 20 then.
20?
Yeah.
When you got your father's button man,
Yeah. Sorry for
But my it's kind of the same. The background is the same as Dick, but my background would be from the south side,
Okay.
from Ringsend. You went to school with the people that you were eventually going to work with on the docks. You know, their fathers and you were going to school with them.
Yeah.
You were going out in the night time with them. You were having a drink with them and everything else. You know, so you eventually end up working with them on the docks because the whole thing was geared towards going. Over
And
on the
did your
docks,
world feel big or small in the sense that you might not have left the Ringsend Dublin Port area, but it was kind of a window into the world, I'd assume. Would you meet people from different countries or different cultures if you were working on the docks? Because you'd have boats coming in from around the world.
You'd meet sailormen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you get talking to them. Because there'd always be a sailorman in the hatch, depending on the cargo. If it was precious cargo, like stuff that whiskey or anything like that, or anything of value, like clothes or ornaments or things. Someone said, it was mentioned that Hector Gray got an awful lot of stuff in. He didn't get all butt-ass stuff, he got some good stuff as well. You know what I mean? He got he'd get
binoculars and cameras.
The binoculars and cameras and that kind of stuff.
Right,
so there'd always be a man in the hatch making sure no one robbed anything. You know, that kind of way.
So they could be from any.
So you got talking to them while someone else was taking some.
You spent a lot more time with foreign people than you did with, say, Irish people.
Really,
so
yeah.
With what's going on at the moment, we more or less work with people from all over the world.
Yeah, you're exposed to different cultures early on.
Exactly, yeah.
So you get to know them, you know what I mean? And
would you have socialised with? Would you have brought them out to the pub or anything?
No, you wouldn't socialise with them.
A lot of the reason why you wouldn't socialise them, say the likes of Indian guys on ships and that, on T-boats, they didn't have a penny.
Yeah. Right, okay.
You got dockers bringing them down clothes, kids' clothes and all this type of thing. And that, before all this, in relation to putting bags of clothes into the bins and all that, dockers brought down kids' clothes to sailormen, Nigerians and that.
There's a bit of solidarity there between people that worked from different
Well,
countries,
it was a
but
bit
the
of
same.
charity. It was more charity than anything, than solidarity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just concern for
Absolutely,
for them.
yeah.
Because they'd be wearing cheesecloth like dresses on them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what you call wrap around. They just be wrapped around them.
Yeah.
And they'd have sandals or something on them. Do you know what I mean? There was no overalls or
they call
or
them,
anything like
they
that.
call them coffin ships because when guys got jobs on them, that was their life. They never left them till they died. They sent back their family some money, at the time, and that. So they were fair to leave them in case somebody else would take their place.
Exactly.
So they were there for duration.
To go back to the boxing, would there been competitions? I mean, there's a boxing club for Dockers. Was that inter Dublin or inter trade or job? Would you one club fights another and puts on a spectacle?
Well, I tell you, my first fight would have been in the British Rail.
Okay.
And that was a Stephen Orden company, a cross-channel Stephen Orden company. The great Harry Perry and Dan O'Power and Gussie Farrow, they all boxed for that. As a matter of fact, when the PORTDublin finished, when the club finished, I went from there to the British Railway, to the boxing club in the British Railway. And that's where I had my first fight. It's where my brother had his first fight. There was 9 of us. There's 9 boys in our family, and the 9 of us was all boxers. But they all fell away. As soon as you start getting hit, you start leaving.
Right.
But only me and my brother, me and Christy, we stuck at it,
The Tony McGauley.
And Tony did.
Paddy, would you have been from a big family? I think everybody I've talked to this evening was from a big family.
Yeah.
That was the
3 sisters and 1 brother.
Okay, so big by today's standards, I guess.
I had 8 brothers and 5 sisters.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
And how big was the house you would have? How big was the house you would have grown up in or lived
We
in?
were in a flat with 2 bedrooms.
Oh,
We were
yeah,
on the
so-
one bed.
Yeah.
Only talking about that the other day. I was looking at Facebook, right? And I seen a photograph on Facebook with 4 kids lying in a bed, and you saw the 4 heads, over the either down, you know what I mean, all lying. And I said, geez, and I said that brought back memories because There was about 8 in there.
So it wasn't
There
the
was
other.
about 8 in there. It wasn't a night.
It wasn't the other.
Well,
It was a blanket.
well, one of the lads I worked with on the docks, Paddy Nevins was his name, right? He said to me, we were talking about army coats put on the bed to keep you warm, right? That's the way it was. There was no way to downs or anything.
Yeah.
There's no way to down. But he said he woke up one morning and he had a tattoo of a harp in his forehead, right? There was a circle with a harp right in the middle of it. And it was from the button in the army.
Very patriotic. I've one last question for you, lads, before I let you go. Does it feel good to be listened to and to kind of be able to share these stories and for other people to be interested in your life and your trade and profession?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Look,
just John, before,
Paddy,
just tell you one bit of a yarn before we go.
Please.
There was the tea boats that used to come in. There was a lot of tea chests used to get broken, waste, and it'd fall on the ground, and it'd be tea spread all over the place. There was one of the lads at one time. He filled his pockets with tea. And when he was going out you had a gate, the extension gate, you had to pass through the harbour policeman going out the gate. And the harbour policeman stopped him because he had two pocketfuls of tea. John Joe O'Connor.
right.
He got two weeks in Mount Joy over these 2 pocketfuls of tea.
Oh my God, that's very hard.
And the warder, when he was leaving, took pity on him, and he had an old suit, and he gave him an old suit that the warder used to wear. He gave him this suit. So I just thought I'd finish on that.
Absolutely. Good to share them, have them for posterity.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things happened, you know.
You could fill a book.
There's a
Fantastic.
million and one thing.
We had fantastic characters on the docks.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He's at the finish it on
You
his
got
story.
your last
I'll
word as
tell
well,
you this story. You heard him talking about Big Nose Kelly, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well, he worked for Irish Shipping. He was a boss in Irish Shipping. And he would have been... There was 2 bosses on the docks. One was Patsy Kelly, the man I'm talking about, and Jack Goyden for Palgrave Murphy's. And to say that they'd be the most feared men on the docks, I'll tell you the reason why they were the most feared. Because they were the boss. They were the real boss. And
also-
everyone looked up. Even bosses looked up to them. You know what I mean? And Patsy Kelly, if you didn't do your work, you were left out the next day, right? But there was an Irish boat. He worked for Irish Shipping. Patsy Kelly worked for Irish Shipping. And one Saturday, he was walking along the deck at lunch, after lunch, about 2:15. Between 2:15 and 2:30. He's walking along the deck. And he seen the crane, and the hook was right in the middle of the hatch. And he looked into the hatch, and there was no one in the hatch. So he let her roll out. Is there anybody down there to hook on this heath? Now the 6 men that was in the hatch and the hatch foreman were in the tween decks, and they were listening to the Grand National, right? They had a little radio with them, right? And he let another roll, and it wasn't, will anybody hook on? It was, where the fucking hell are you? Is there someone got to bleeding hook on this here? And with that, Canadian Joe walked out. And he looked up and he said to Patsy, in the name of Jesus, Patsy, will you stop rowing? You're not knocking down 2 horses. They don't get it.
Thank you
So
so
that's
much
it,
for
right?
thanks a million for sharing your stories.
It's nice to meet you.
And you as well.
Thanks to Richard, Paddy, John, Margaret and Declan for speaking to me. And once again, a big thanks to the Dublin Port Company and to Cleary's Pub for their organisation and hospitality in putting all of this together. Once again, Solidarity, the Dockers of Dublin Port, runs at the Substation, Alexandra Road at Dublin Port, Thursday to Sunday, 11:30am to 3:30pm, until Sunday, 18th of February. That's all from me this week, so all that's left to say is thanks for listening, and sláinte.